Hello, I'm Dave Shadovitz, editor of Human Resource Executive, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Are You Ready to Deliver the New Workforce Experience? Special thanks goes to Achievers, which is sponsoring today's webinar. Achievers' Employee Success Platform delivers proven employee recognition, continuous listening tools, and timely coaching tips for organizations to give their people ownership of the employee experience and to drive organizational success. Before I begin to introduce our topic and speaker, I'd like to just take a moment to review a few housekeeping items. First, be sure to have the volume turned up on your computer so you can hear the audio for the webinar. If you have any troubles hearing the audio through the computer, press the Connect Audio button at the bottom left of your screen, and you'll receive the teleconference instructions. To ask a question about the content of the presentation during the event, you may use the Q&A panel located on your screen. You can send questions to the presenter throughout the presentation. We will be leaving time at the end of the webinar to answer them. Within 48 hours, an archived version of the presentation will be available on the webinars page of hrexecutive.com. And then finally, if you encounter any problems during the webinar, feel free to contact WebEx Technical Support at 866-779-3239. And now on to today's presentation. The HR technologist role is quickly evolving. As we all know only too well, technology is advancing at a rapid pace, and the HR function needs to possess a very different set of competencies to excel in this environment. Included among those core competencies is the ability for HR to meet the changing expectations of the new workforce experience. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Jason Averbook, who will be exploring what these changes mean for the HR profession today. Jason is an industry analyst and co-founder and CEO of Leapgen, an emerging growth management consulting firm that's dedicated to raising the potential of HR and IT leadership as they strive to innovate their organization's digital workforce experience. Jason's author of a couple of books at least, including his latest, The Ultimate Guide to a Digital Workforce Experience, Leap for a Purpose. Jason has more than 20 years of experience in the HR and technology industry working with leading companies around the world to help them transform their HR organizations into strategic partners. Jason is also a regular speaker at Human Resource Executive's HR Technology Conference and Exposition. You can plan now, by the way, to hear Jason and other top industry thought leaders at the event in October. Register by July 31st to lock in your best rate of $500 through the Super Saver rate. And you can visit hrtechconference.com for details and to register. Jason, welcome, and please take it from here.
David, thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I wish I could see all of you, or I wish you could all say hi to me. Please feel free to send questions, as David mentioned, throughout in the chat window or in the Q&A box there, and we will make sure that I at least say hi and do a call out. So I'm going to skip over a little about what David said from a Leapgen standpoint, just because we have a lot of content to get through. But if I could just really quickly, Leapgen is a digital transformation company, and our focus is shaping the future of work. The way that we do that is through what we call the 4 C's. The 4 C's are consulting, coaching, content, and community. Today, you're participating in content portion of a lot of what we do, but we also have an online community, and that online community is called Fuelwork. And Fuelwork is growing very rapidly to be one of the largest online communities focused around digital HR. So as you can see on your screen right there, there's a QR code. This is your first exercise. as part of this webinar, what I would love for you to do is take out your phone or your device, snap a picture of that QR code, focus your iPhone or whatever device you have on it. As you can see, what it's going to do is it's going to pop up a "Would you like to go to this page" section as in one of your notifications. Once you do, that's going to allow you quick access to the community. Something exclusive we're doing as part of this webinar is giving you access to the community, as well as you'll be able to chat afterwards with us about the content that we covered on the webinar. So hopefully all of you are taking part in this experience, and what we're going to do afterwards is ask you how frictionless that experience is to join the community and how it compares to what's going on inside your organization. So some of you have seen parts of this presentation. There's a lot of new content here as well. And what I want to talk about is really why digital transformation and why today. The main focus that organizations are going through today is this concept of looking at the rate of change. And our rate of change is so drastic. Think about the rate of change outside an organization. Everything from devices to apps to even how quickly news spreads around the world. And think about inside your organization. You know, we have better technology in the palm of our hands than our companies give us to work with. We have better apps on our phones than our companies give us to work with. But yet, when we show up to work, all of a sudden it seems like we can go back a little bit. And I like to think of that, you guys, as how do we communicate in the year we live? So our job as HR technologists today is to focus on how do we propagate the employee value proposition. Some of you might be saying, dude, our job is not to focus on the value proposition. Your job is to focus on the employee value proposition. Your job is to get people, grow people, develop people, and keep people, as well as count them and get them paid. So our job is to communicate in the year we live in. But a lot of us, in my personal opinion, we've been disrespecting the year we live in. We've fallen behind. So it's 2019 outside of work, right? Everyone agrees. You may not agree with other things I say on this webinar, but hopefully you agree that it's 2019 outside of work. What year is it inside your company? What year is it inside your company today? So here's our first polling question. You know, what year does it feel like in your organization compared to the outside world? 2019 or beyond, like you're in the space age. You know, we're a few years back, 2014 to 2019. You know, it's 2005 to 2014, or a little bit of humor, pre-Y2K. So which one is it? I'd love to get your guys' response here. And what this is going to do is this is going to help us understand exactly what that chasm is. And if there's nothing else you take away from this webinar today, I want you to go back and work with your HR leadership team, work with your IT team, and think about the chasm. Think about the chasm that we have going on at work. Now, the poll ended. We should see the results here come through in a second. And some of you probably have some guesses as to what the results are going to be. My personal guess is that most people are going to say 2014 to 2019. But I think a lot of people sometimes forget even what year it actually is. So let's see the results. Whew. So we've got 2014 to 2019 at 40%, and we've got 2005 to 2014 at 40%, with another 10% at pre-Y2K. So that gives us 90%, you guys. That gives us 90% who are disrespecting the year we live in. And people always ask me, why are you doing this thing with Leapgen? It's easy for me. I have two boys. They're 14 and 11. They're going to enter the workforce. And when they enter the workforce, I want the workforce to be somewhat like what they deal with on the outside on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for participating in that poll. Once again, ask questions, chat, comment along the way. So when we think about this, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the fact that digital is not technology. We live in a digital world. Sounds like a Madonna song or something, living in a digital world. We oftentimes attack it with technology, and we can't do that. Digital thinking is not technology thinking. And for all of us HR technologists, Our job is to transition ourselves to be and to think digital. So when we think about digital, this is the thinking, you guys, that drives experience. This is the thinking that drives experience. It requires these 4 components. It requires, first, having a vision and mindset about what experience means. It's all cool that everyone in the world today is talking about experience. But if you want to get underneath and scratch that itch about what's the experience issue, you need to have a shared vision and a shared strategy. You don't just go out and buy technology to scratch that itch. The second, you have to understand who the people are that you're trying to create an experience for, and don't just say employees. We're going to talk about that and realize how just answering employees is way too shallow. We have to think about our processes and say, hey, are employees, managers, applicants, alumni really going to take part and participate in these processes when there's nothing in it for them, when there's no value, when they're dated, when it feels like 2000? And then once we get those 3 things answered, we can then get into what's the technology. But if we start with technology, our chances of meeting or exceeding expectations are about 10%. It's about 10%. We have to get that vision down. And we have to work with the HR leadership team and the organization to understand that this is not an IT project. This is a digital program as to how we're going to work as an organization going forward. So all of this said, 3 or 4 organizations don't have a digital strategy. When we work with organizations or when I speak at conferences, and next week I'm in Asia, I say, show me your digital strategy, and what they hand me is a technology project plan. That's not the same thing. They're 2 different things. The technology project plan is the 10%. The rest of it is what drives our success. So let's move on to this second question. Once again, everyone stop doing email, stop multitasking, answer the polling question. Do you have a true digital HR people strategy? This should be easy. Yes, no, or working on it. Once again, do you have a true digital HR people strategy? Not a technology strategy. That's only one part of it. So once again, either yes, no, or we're working on it. This one should be a quick result. And hopefully with the hundreds that are on, we get some good results. I'm going to say that 70% are working on it, 20% no, and 10% yes. And we'll wait a second for the results to come in. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. This is fascinating, and I would challenge you all to make sure that as part of your plans for 2019 and beyond, you put in place plans to have this digital people strategy, because it's going to make your technology work so much easier. Whew, I was wrong. We have 53% that don't. We have 37% that are working on it. That means we have 90% that either know or are working on it, and we have 10% that haven't. So guys, that's huge. This is a problem. This is a huge problem for our industry. We spend millions and millions of dollars buying technology that we don't have a vision for. When that happens, we have a huge opportunity to not be successful. So if nothing else you take out of this, start working on that digital people strategy, and that's where we're going to go right now, is to talk about how to do that, and how does it tie back to experience, you guys? How does it tie back to experience? So the first thing is, what's the organization's mindset? Is it growth or is it fixed? We need to have that vision, and what does a vision look like? Now, you guys are all going to get copies of these slides. You're all going to be able to interact in a second to get copies of them. But what you see on the screen is an example of a vision statement. Okay? You see an example of a vision statement. You see examples of guiding principles. You see examples of attributes, and you see examples of measures. So your vision map, your vision story should be, what's my 30-second cocktail napkin pitch of what's my digital people strategy? Then what are my principles? What are my attributes? And most importantly, how am I going to measure them? So whether you guys are doing a portal, whether you guys are doing a new performance management system, whether you're doing a new core HR system, whether you're putting in payroll in another country, whatever it is, what is the experience? What is the experience that I'm going for? The measure shouldn't be go live. Okay, that's a huge change in thought for us as a function. The measure shouldn't be go live. I always tell people go live, I'm a little bit off kilter here, but go live should be called go begin. That's really when I want to start once I'm live, not thank gosh I'm live. So how do we come up with our measures that people are going to come back and say we're successful, understanding that every company has its own unique signature, and understanding that we, as HR technologists, to be able to be digitally proficient, have to get the HR function to understand and answer this simple question. What do we want to be great at versus what is it okay to be okay at? If you're going to build a workforce experience, you need to get alignment and synergy on this question. What is it that we want to be great at versus what is it okay we want to be okay at? And the answer to this question should be tied to competitive differentiation and competitive edge. So if I want to build a quote-unquote competitive edge, when I go to build that competitive edge, I'm able to answer this question. If doing payroll is what I want to be great at, there's a problem. I should just be performing at payroll. I shouldn't be great, quote unquote, at payroll. I hope that makes sense to everyone. It's a huge, huge part of what drives success. Now, moving on, and once again, please type in your questions in the Q&A box. I'd love you guys to interact a little and type some questions as we go. Don't just save them for the end. Almost every company we work with says something like this. They have an amazing budget for culture and engagement, but they don't have money for technology, or in this case, as you see on the slide, digital. Do you guys ever hear that? We have a budget for culture, we have a budget for engagement, we have a budget for performance. It's every CEO's mission that says people are in the top. But then all of a sudden, we don't have a budget for technology. That is a huge problem, because ask yourself this question. How do you think you're going to get the information to them? How do you think you're going to deliver the capabilities? How do you think you're going to deliver the analytics if you don't have digital strategy or you don't have digital part of your budget? You can't do one today without the other. You can't do one today without the other. And that's really, really important to get across to your function as you're building out budgets and strategies. There's a great question that came in about what's the digital strategy for a growth company having tons of acquisitions. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. It's a great, great question. Thank you so much for chiming in with that. So the first thing we do is we set our vision. We talked about that. And to create a great experience, we have to do that. Wow, what a brilliant question. Mike, I'm not going to say the last name. Mike just asked the question, what is Leapgen great at? Leapgen is great, and our competitive edge is focusing on how do we help organizations get the most out of their people and the most out of their technology spend. That's what we're great at, period, end of story. The other thing that we're great at, by the way, is making sure that Leap, our name, which stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof, that we're inspiring people constantly that love, you have to love what you do to generate energy, to do the audacious, and to prove value. And that's a circle that has to be focused on. So those are the two things that we're great at, and what we focus our digital strategy on are all of those things. So if you think through that and we think through where we're at, we think today about our people strategy. And we think about people, how do we focus on people? We need to know our people. We need to make sure that we understand who our workers are, Are they gig workers? Are they candidates? Are they alumni? Are they managers? What are they? And once we know our people and we know how they work, by the way, there's a big difference between knowing your people and knowing how they work, that starts to help us. Now, how do we do that? When we're developing and designing experiences, we have to think about this concept of personas. Okay, and personas, this is done a ton when we think about customer experience. And you guys can learn a ton from customer experience and think about how does that apply to employee experience. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But a persona is a character. And if you can see on the screen, it's giving me a biography of who the person is. It's talking about their experience. It's talking about their needs. It's talking about the moments that we missed an opportunity to make an impact. Some people call these moments that matter. You can call them either one. But moments that missed is really powerful because where did we not make an impact on developing and growing the engagement of that worker? And when we think about experience, we then move on to this next concept, which is how do we look at how people are feeling? How do we look at what they're thinking? So what are their needs? Where do they work? You know, what's them at home? What are their memorable moments? A snapshot about them. This helps me drive what they're thinking about. And then how do I put that onto a journey, you guys? So how do I then go through a journey process and say, I'm journeying? So, you know, right now we're on slide 25, and it looks like some people are having some trouble on the webinar, so apologies for that. Looks like it's caught up now. Sorry about that. I'll make sure I say which slides. So we're on slide 25, which is talking about the journey, and we're talking about the journey, which is how are people feeling pre-day one, day 2 plus, and ongoing. And notice we're looking at, guys, how people are thinking and feeling along the way. When someone says, how do we think about experience, summarize this slide. And whether the process is someone doing a performance review for the first time, whether their concept is someone, is someone using a smartphone to actually work with our people function for the first time, we want to know how they're feeling. This concept of a journey map is key. So when you're thinking about experience, you start with personas, you then move on to journeys. And along the way, you're doing your journeys, you think about this E word. And the E word is not just experience, it's empathy. How are people feeling? How are people feeling throughout this process? What are they doing? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are their goals? What are their objectives? So when you think through that, you think about going deep about your people. And now we in HR technology, who are the people that we've designed for in the past? We've designed for the HR payroll and benefits department. Going forward, who are we designing for? The workforce. That's the experience that we want to measure. So we're on slide 27 right now, and we're going to start talking about process. Okay, if you go back to slide 26 real quickly, sorry for whoever's driving that, you can see there's the empathy map. So we're really looking at that empathy map. What are people doing, seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, obstacles, and goals? And once again, you'll get a copy of these as part of the presentation that you get. So let's move on now to process. When we think about process, we start to think about what are the things that we want people to interact with. And this is where I'm going to ask you guys all to interact. So you guys should all have your smartphones handy in a few minutes. We're going to use an example of a bot. But we want to think about the difference between automation and digitization. So what do I automate versus what do I digitize? And by the way, most of the time what we've done in HR over time is automated. We do what I call technology transition versus true digital transformation. Technology transition versus true digitization. And that's really, really key. And Mario just had a great comment, and I love you guys commenting. It energizes me. automate for repetitive tasks, back office. And there's a lot of things that make sense for, and if I can add a little bit to that, we automate, but we can add more value. Well, we automate. Digitization is the concept of adding more value. Okay, so going forward, every organization we work with, we think about this concept of touch. And, everyone says we want to be high touch, we want to be high touch, we want to be high touch. And when we're thinking about experience in today's world, I like to think about there's two types of touching. There's high touch human, which, I'm going to my business partners and I'm going to a call center. And by the way, we shouldn't call it a call center. We should call it an experience center, different topic. Or we move on to high-touch digital, which is I'm able to deliver capabilities through technology, through a digital approach, in a way that actually gets people engaged. Okay, it actually gets people engaged. So when you think about your processes and you're going through and developing your experience and your digital strategy, you have to be able to ask this question. Which of my capabilities am I going to focus on high-touch human? And which of my capabilities am I going to say are going to be high-touch digital? We like to think of, and Mario, this goes back to one of your points, is processes that are RAD, repeatable, auditable, and documented. Those are the things where digital makes sense. For those processes where it really makes sense to talk to a person, that's where, of course, I'm going to use high-touch human. But guess what, you guys? You can't get this until you understand your personas and until you have that vision. A lot of people just jump right into process design without thinking about that vision and without understanding their people. And that's very, 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 very dangerous. You're letting technology, in often case, drive what you're doing versus you deciding how you're going to use technology. So one of the things I'm going to ask you guys to do here is I want you to actually interact in a high-touch digital way. So to get a copy of these slides, you should send a text to this number on the screen. +1, everyone knows what a text is, right? Now, no one WhatsApp or WeChat or Facebook Messenger. Send an SMS text to this number, +1 614 610 1122. And the text of your text should be HRE webinar. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to interact with a bot. That bot's going to say, hey, how you doing today? Great to see you. Whatever you want that bot to say. Once again, this is a huge point, you guys. In the future, you're going to be designing conversations, not processes. So my bot's talking to you. You're texting HRE webinar. The bot's asking you for your email address. And within your email, if you put your email address there, you already have the slide. Now, think about that process for a second. Think about that process for a second. Did you go to change management posters or celebrations? No. Did you go to training? No. Did you log into another system? No. Was it frictionless? Was it fairly simple? Was it fairly seamless? And when you think about what you just did, that is an example, you guys, of how work should work and will work into the future. It is being delivered to someone, as Josh Burson would say, in the flow of work. And that is a huge, huge advantage versus having someone log into a system, going to HR, going to the portal, going to the link farm, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so hopefully that worked for you. If it didn't, of course, now technology doesn't work all the time. My boss told me that it has worked for a lot of people. There's an example. Okay, there's an example of high-touch digital. Now, ask yourself, how did it feel? Did you feel lonely? Would you have rather talked to someone? Would you rather called? Would you rather waited on hold? Questions for you to answer as you think about processes. But once again, and I beg of you to use this quote, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So my hope in using a bot like this, or if you think about how earlier on we did not, how you use the QR code, which you're going to get an opportunity to use again later to join the Fieldwork community, it's designed to be frictionless. Designed to be frictionless. So when we think about frictionless, what does that mean? What does a frictionless workforce experience mean? And, once again, I hope this is I call it a money slide to you, one that you take back and do something with. Getting the right product to the right people at the right moment through the right channel. The right product. Now, the example of a product, it could be a knowledge document, it could be a video, it could be a transaction, it could be to start a bot talking to you like just happened. That's the right product. To the right people, personalized based on knowing who it is. Okay, once again, not going to the intranet or portal link farm, but truly, truly, truly the right people based on knowing the persona. At the right moment, when someone needs it, at the moment they need it that can impact engagement. Okay? When you think about getting service from any airline, from any bank, from any office location, think about anything where you get service, which we get hundreds of times a day, Uber, Lyft, whatever it is. What is that moment of engagement where I have that opportunity to impact it? That's the right moment. Okay? And then through the right channel. Is it a bot? Is it a piece of paper, which is fine? Is it a mobile device? What is the right channel? So once again, if nothing else I've said so far, I feel like a comedian sometimes trying to get the jokes to work, but if nothing else I said so far makes any sense, take this. And every process you're rolling out, how do I get the right product, not every single document in the world, to the right people, at the right moment, through the right channel. If you do that, your success in creating experience is going to be so much greater. Okay, and a lot of people say, well, when we did our technology implementation, we didn't talk anything about this. Bingo. Technology is the tool. What you need to do is think about how you're going to use that tool, not how the tool is going to use you and your people. So when we think about this concept of experience and that equation of what it is, it's a combination of transaction plus interaction. Transaction plus interaction, that's what creates an experience. Okay, if you're just focused on the transaction alone, like we have in HR, just self-service, no one's ever going to say, oh, that was an amazing experience. Something I use very infrequently. It's something that doesn't, once I hit OK or click the save button, it says saved. It doesn't give me any sense of trust, any sense of feeling, any sense that HR is ever going to use this data, anything like that. It's just a dumb transaction. It would be as if you ordered an Uber or Lyft and you couldn't see the map. You couldn't see how long the car was coming in. You couldn't see what kind of car it was. It would be the same if you ordered DoorDash or picked your food delivery store. You could pick your food, but didn't say how long that was going to take, didn't give you a price, couldn't pay for it online. Transaction versus interaction. Transaction plus interaction, that's what creates the experience. Now, where does someone go buy this? You don't. You create it. You create it based on your vision, based on your people, and based on how you want your processes to work. And all of a sudden, we start measuring different things. So instead of measuring things like service level agreements, we're measuring experience level. Instead of thinking about our call center, we're thinking about an experience center. We're measuring where people are abandoning when it comes to journeys. Because guess what? Where they abandon, that's where frustration sets in. Think about this for a second. When you abandon, you get frustrated. And what do? You call. Who are you going to call? Your HR business partner. What does that do? Defeats the purpose of ever trying to automate. So doing real-time journey analytics and understanding the sentiment, that's key for continuous improvement. And by the way, this is new, you guys. This is new to our HR industry because we haven't been great at continuous improvement. We've been good at rolling out modules. We've been good at rolling out modules and watching upgrade versions come through. I'm talking continuous improvement so that if 70% of the people abandon something today, I can fix it by tomorrow. So key points to think about. And some of those examples are looking at things like, what's my experience rating? How are my managers feeling about processes? Where are they abandoning? What do my channels look like? What are my interactions with repeat customers? And, one of the things that I find fascinating is people oftentimes try to do things like measure case deflection. Like, I don't want to deflect people away from HR. I want them to desire. Like, let's shift our thinking from deflection to desire. Does that make sense? Let's get people to desire working with us, not deflect them away from working with us. So example of those scorecards and what those experience dashboards look like, and even the word cloud you see on the screen here, what people are chatting about. What are the words they're talking about? Help me deliver a better ongoing experience. And ultimately what I want to do is I want to shift from people being enraged to people being engaged. I want to shift from enragement to engagement. Okay, now think about that for a second. When someone's trying to do a single sign-on, they're stuck within your portal, they can't get into where they're trying to go, they don't know where to navigate to, what are they? They feel enraged. One of the things that's fascinating with a lot of our organizations we work with around the world is that their candidate experience is more engaging than once someone's hired. Like the candidate experience of, we're going to focus on that because guess what? Once we got them, then they're in. That's not good. I mean, that's bait and switch. I call it cultural continuance. How do you keep your culture going from when someone's a candidate to when they're an ongoing employee? So the shift from enragement to engagement should be our focus. And once again, the question is not, are you engaged or enraged? Is the employee enraged or engaged along the process? So I'm going to ask you this question. This is our third polling question. Do you have a current employee workforce experience project or program underway? Yes, no, about to begin, maybe next year. Now, the reason that I threw this poll in here is because for me, almost anywhere I go in the world, people are talking about doing something with experience. People, CHROs, are actually talking about how important experience is. But everyone's a little bit different. It's kind of like we're talking about it, but we're not really doing things. So I personally think this is about 50% no, 20% yes, and the rest in C and D. And really, what you guys, when I guess, as you can tell by my bad guessing, I can't see the numbers. So we will wait one more second, and we will show the results. We have a large attendance on this webinar, so sorry for that. Wow. once again, clearly when I guess, I'm wrong. 43% have an experience initiative underway. 21% don't. Another 31% either about to begin or maybe next year. So if we think about that, that's 75%. 75% either have something underway, about to begin, or going to do something next year. And that's awesome. So that is why, that 75% number is exactly why we all need to think different. And that leads us to thinking about technology. And by the way, there's some great questions that have come in. Keep them coming, because we're going to definitely get to them in a few minutes here. And once again, another great place for you to talk about this is on the Fieldwork community, which you'll get that QR code in a second to link to again. When we think about technology and we think about experience, what we have to do is we have to think about how do we build our technology foundation to be anti-fragile. And when I say people always say, oh, cool, Jason, what's that mean? To me, anti-fragile can be defined by a few things. First of all, how many places does someone have to go to interact with the people function? Is it one place? And notice I said place, not system. Place. How many places? Another question for you to ask yourself, how many times does name get entered? If name gets entered more than 0, you're fragile. Another thing to think about, are you still trying to do everything in one system around the world when it comes to technology? If you are, you're fragile, because that's never going to happen. You have to build a structure that allows you to work with multiple different types of technology. And while you can, focus on getting most things in one, you're always going to work with an outsourced provider. You're always going to have people using the number one HR tool ever developed in the world, Microsoft, Excel, or PowerPoint, or Word. You're always going to use multiple pieces of technology. And the new thing to think about for us, guys, is that when we think about fragility, we have to think about more than just our structured data. It used to be enough to say, guess what, everything's in one place, we're done. Bingo. I have a great mentor of mine named Ro Henson, who I used to work with at PeopleSoft, who came up with a quote, let's not count heads, let's make heads count. 20% structured data, that's counting heads. Our unstructured data are all of our FAQs, our PDFs, our summary plan descriptions, our PowerPoint presentations, our knowledge about how stuff gets done. When someone talks into their device and says, what's my PTO balance? They're going to get a result back, which is structured data. When someone says, how do I take more time off? They're going to get unstructured data. If your knowledge is scattered all over the place, bots and your experience isn't going to work. So when we think about data, both structured and unstructured data, data is what drives personalization, and personalization is what makes the experience. If I have this anti-fragility in place, it drives my credibility. If I have good credibility, I can deploy additional capabilities. If I deploy additional capabilities, they can be personalized. I'm not doing a peanut butter spread approach. And if I personalize, then I start to think about how do I automate that with AI and bots. But if you get caught up in the shiny object syndrome, SOS I call it, where you go and buy a bunch of bots and you hope that somehow they're going to change your experience without having data, think about when you talk into Alexa or talk into Siri. If there's no data underneath it, what do you get? It doesn't know what to do. And of course, these tools get smarter and smarter over time, but they have to start with your data. So people say, what do we do if we can't focus on building an experience strategy? Like, guys, focus on your foundation. Because if you can make your foundation strong today, going forward, that's going to be what's most crucial to drive overall experience. The last thing I'll talk about when I think about technology, and then I want to make sure we leave some time for questions, is understand that user interface is not an experience. User interface is not an experience. So when people say, oh, great, I'm going to choose the best product in the world because it's got the best user interface. Or someone might even say the best user experience. I try to remind people that, first of all, your employees are not users. I mean, users is not the right way to think about your people. Your people are people. They were hired to do something else besides being users of your technology. So user in itself is a little too systematic for what we're doing today. But the second thing is think about the apps that you use for a second. You might say they have a great user interface. Let's say you love Uber's user interface. But if the car doesn't show up, what's your experience? Bad. Let's say you love the user experience of Amazon. But if the product doesn't show up, what is it? Bad. Let's say you love the user interface on Tinder. Okay, so a couple people turned red. But then all of a sudden what shows up isn't a good experience. Actually, that's a terrible analogy. I even used it wrong. What shows up doesn't give you the best experience. Your overall experience of these tools is not going to be positive. Okay, so the technology itself is just one component. Okay, ongoing experience is what I want to be thinking about. So before I turn it back over to Dave, what I would love you guys to think about and walk away from this little presentation with, which, by the way, I'm happy to talk more, and on the community we talk about all the time, HR technology itself is a component that fuels the future of HR. HR technology itself, if you just break down the two words, it's technology for who? HR. If I think about going forward, everything I do in the people function needs to be thought about as having a digital way to deliver it and go through that concept of mindset, people, process, and technology. The last thing I'll leave you with is this visual. I'll leave you with this visual. Think about an IV hooked up to your arm. What I want is I want one IV ultimately from the enterprise to the workforce. One IV. Now think about what we do today. If I roll out a new employee referral system, I stick a new IV in my arm. If I roll out a new benefits program, what do? Stick another IV in. If I roll out a new learning management system, what do? Stick another IV in. If I roll out a new way to show rewards and recognition, what do? Stick another IV in. If I want a new way to view my paycheck, what do? Stick another IV in. You get the point there when it comes to HR. But now think across HR, finance, operations. Think about that poor employee's arm. It's black and blue all over. So going forward, when we think about experience, we must think about how do I create that opportunity to drive how do people work with the organization in a frictionless way, and how do we make sure that that frictionless way are doing the things that we actually want to create these great experiences for our people. Now remember, once again, I gave you this opportunity earlier. I'll have you do it again. You can take a picture of this QR code, which takes you, if you're using an iPhone or an Android, takes you right to a place where you can join the community, or you can click on this link, bit.ly/fuelwork, which also takes you to the online community. And after the webinar, not that everyone's just sitting around with time on their hands, but I'll be doing a post-webinar chat in the FuelWork community, for the next 30 minutes. So if we want to drill into additional questions that we haven't been able to answer during the Q&A part, which we're about to begin, you'll be able to ask those questions in the Fuel Work community afterwards. And once again, the power, once again, I'm not going to talk about the community, but the power of what we're trying to show here is frictionless. So right product, right people, right moment, right channel, that's what's going to drive the shift from what I call enragement to engagement, or from adoption to addiction. So on that, I will turn it back over to David. And David, there's some great questions that I've purposely avoided, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, we did get a number of really good questions in. Let me start feeding it to you. We have a few minutes to take them. How do you measure, somebody wants to know, how do you measure the overall employee experience? What metrics do you recommend?
So it's a great question, and one of the things that's really, really important, and I'm going to try to do this, it's going to drive the WebEx producer crazy, I'm sure, but I'm going to go way back to the beginning to answer this question. When you think about the measures that you're trying to achieve, oh, sorry, I went a little too far, guys. When you think about the measures you're trying to achieve, what's really important to think about is what are you actually trying to do? So what is your vision? So let me just take this client example for a question, or as an example. You know, I want it to be seamless, efficient, and agile. So seamless, I'm going to have my measure is going to be the deployment of a new portal, fewer steps to get something done, and a better knowledge base. Okay? I'm going to measure a net promoter score tied to those things. Being efficient and increasing the number of processes I've automated, less rework coming from tier 0. So that's my measure. So I hate to not give you a question, quote unquote, or give you an answer, quote unquote, but it's important to understand what you're trying to do in order to come up with those measures. The most important, though, if I could give you a measure, is the concept of measuring someone's sentiment. And if you think about it, you can't walk out of a restroom today without being asked to push a button as to what was your experience. You know, you can't go ahead and do anything online from a CX standpoint, not EX standpoint yet, but a CX, customer experience standpoint, without actually giving that kind of feedback. So I'm going to say getting those measures is key, and then understand how people are feeling with both a objective number and a subjective number. So let them give us a thumbs up, but also give comments so that we can hold ourselves accountable to that experience level agreement.
Okay, Jason, do you have any thoughts on how you create a business case for employee experience?
Did you ask me that question on purpose, or? So when you think about a business case for employee experience, my question, I stutter, sorry. My question is, how important are your people? Like, if I'm spending money to keep my people, grow my people, develop my people, how do I not have a business case for employee experience? I hate to be so stupid about it, but you know, employee experience is the way that we compete in this world as businesses, by having an employee experience. And there are so many studies that show that an employee experience, a good employee experience, equates to a better customer experience. So if my CEO, CFO, CIO care about my customer experience and getting customers, growing customers, developing customers, then guess what? I better care about my employee experience and realize that A, the employees are going to be more satisfied, but B, they're going to be more productive. Because people in today's organizations, I mean, we do a lot of waste assessments in companies. They spend 50% of their time doing stuff that's not what they were hired to do. Imagine if I had 50% more time to focus on the customer versus the other stuff. I'm going to have better customers who are going to spend more money with me, which drives business results.
Okay, now at the beginning of this, there was a question about digital strategy for a growth company having tons of acquisitions. Do you have any advice for a company like that?
Yeah, so if you think about tons of acquisitions, a growth company with tons of acquisitions, the first thing that they have to do is get people aligned to where they're going. So think about that for a second. You know, I'm company A, I'm company B, I'm company C, I'm company D, and guess what? Now we're all part of company E. And if you think about that, A plus B plus C plus D is supposed to equal something greater than E. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 should equal more than 4. The way I do that is by getting people into a online digital community that is talking about the new employee value proposition, that's helping me understand how this new company adds more value than the company separately does, and drives the concept of alignment in where they're going. If you do that, all of a sudden your acquisitions pay for themselves 1,000% faster. And guess what? You could have a bunch of systems behind the scenes. I always use Amazon as my example. Amazon, when you go to buy something on Amazon, it's 192 systems. No one ever knows that. They only know one. You could have 192 systems from all these companies you've acquired behind the scenes, but guess what? The employees, within the first 10 days, they all feel like they're part of the same company. And guess what? That is huge. That is huge. David, back to you.
Okay, well, I guess this is going to be the last question I'm going to ask then. Somebody said, as a kid, I caddied for Jack Welch. He was so focused on vision. What are the best examples of HR vision that you've seen? Anything come to mind there, Jason? And we'll have to conclude with this. So if you have any final thoughts, you'll maybe share it at the end of this.
Yeah, I love, Quinn, your question. I hope you join our Fuel Work community. I have a great example for you there as well. But that question about vision, one of the things that drives digital success is when your HR vision clearly is aligned to your corporate vision. So very succinct, the impact of the people function on corporate objectives. If that is done, and that is great, quote unquote, that alignment, you can see that if I in the people function do X, it generates Y from my corporate vision. If my HR vision is a bunch of stuff like drive engagement, increase performance, give people career opportunities, that's all cool, but there's a leap. There's a long, long leap from saying we're going to A, do those things, and B, showing the impact of those things. So, David, the phrase that we always use is, what's the other side of the equation? So don't just list the HR visions, the HR things that you're going to do or that you're going to focus on. Talk about the things you're going to do and focus on, but then the other side of the equation equals to drive customer success, or to drive share of wallet, or to drive higher net promoter score. If you do that, then all that stuff comes together, and the HR vision isn't just a standalone little HR vision, but the HR vision is not just standing there alone. It truly is integrated into the corporate vision, and then guess what? When I start to prioritize what I do digitally, it makes much more sense.
Thank you so much, Jason. Excellent. We'll have to end there. A great presentation. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Achievers for sponsoring today's webinar. As mentioned earlier, everybody will receive a link to the archived version of the webinar in the next 48 hours, and you can link to it and view it again at your leisure. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at a future Human Resource Executive webinar. Thank you.